I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, in what you would call an idyllic home. Very much, if you've ever seen Leave It to Beaver, that was kind of how our family was. It was pretty much perfect until one day I came home from playing with some friends on the way to the library, and my mom asked my sisters and I to come downstairs and told us that our dad had left. And I didn't have any concept of what that meant. What do you mean left? Well, left, packed his stuff up and disappeared. He left a note in the mailbox, and we started a life with a single mom, and who had not gone to college, who was a stay-at-home mom, who had to go to work suddenly to take care of 3 children. Well, we went on like that for about a year and a half. Dad came back and stayed for about a year, and then did it again. Disappeared again. And I think at that point, it was when my heart kind of hardened, and when I told myself, after not having money and not having anything that we kind of wanted like it was before, that this will never be me again. No matter what it takes, I will have money. I'll be able to buy something if I want to go buy it. Well, we went, Dad came back about 9 months later that time, and but by then my mom had divorced him, but had remarried to an alcoholic. That brought its own little set of details. All of that's a whole other story. That ended after about a year, but by this time I was through high school, preparing for college, and came over here to Nashville and went to Belmont University. Had a great school, a great time at that school, learned a lot, graduated in 4 years, and took a job right out of college with a business here locally. They're not here anymore, but and basically my only job at this place was to write the checks to these contractors that we had working for us. And so we had a computer, you had a little printer, and then a rubber stamp with the signature of the lady who owned the business. And one day I walked off the golf course with my friends and decided I needed a new driver. And the next day at work was the first day that I made a conscious decision in my life to compromise. And I wrote myself a check from that computer for $300, and I went and bought myself a new driver. At the end of that summer, I was caught doing that. The total on that 3 months was about $29,000. I was prosecuted here in Nashville, but I received what they call, the legal term is judicial diversion. In our way of talking, it means you get away with it. And my family mortgaged their home and paid the debt for me, and then I paid them back. And I did 40 hours of community service, made a phone call once a month, and again, got away with it. I went about 5 more years working at various jobs over in Knoxville, where I had moved back to, until one day I started working at a company. And I decided one day I was going to sell my computer. It was just my personal computer I used at home. I sold it on eBay, and I got an email from the guy a couple of weeks later and said, "Do you have any more computers you want to sell?" And I said, "No, I was just getting rid of my personal one." And my job at this place was to do all kinds of new business and selling and that kind of thing. But at the time, it was to also pay the people who took our surveys. And we paid them in Amazon.com gift certificates. And it would take all day long to explain this to you, but the simple version is I began to divert these funds that we were paying these people, converting them and selling them to this guy for about 70 cents on the dollar. And that went on for about 3.5 to 4 years. Now, that's what was going on at work. What was going on at home, I had accepted Jesus as my Savior when I was 8 years old at a Southern Baptist revival. And if you ever go to one of those when you're 8 years old, you learn you really don't want to burn for the rest of your life. And so you'll walk up there and say, okay, and think I'm not going to have to burn for the rest of my life. But it's not really about, at that age, when you're in that setting. For me, it wasn't a relationship with Christ, but we were at church. We were there every time the door was open. We were involved in the youth group, involved in the choir. We were all of those things. When I got to college, I was still involved in the BSU. I think that's the Baptist Student Union, if they still call it that. But was still a Christian. But I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. I didn't walk with him daily. This carried on into my professional life when I was in Knoxville. I started to drink alcohol heavily, daily, heavily. And I didn't really care about anything that happened. I didn't care about, I was a good guy. I was a nice guy. I'd help you out if I could. But I never really, I didn't really care about much of anything until it was the fall of 2006. I had a lot of my friends over to my house. I had a big screen television up on the wall. We were watching a football game. Everybody's telling me that I had it made, that I had just really had it all. I'm about 29 years old at the time and making a lot of money at this business I was at. When they left, though, I poured myself another drink. I sat down at my computer and I typed into Google methods of suicide. Because I had gotten to a place where nothing meant anything to me. I knew that what they saw was a lie, that it wasn't real, that a lot of that stuff they saw wasn't honestly earned. And I decided then I was just going to do that. I didn't know when, but I knew I was going to do that. As we went through that fall, I came home one day in January of 2007. I had had enough of it. I had gotten through Christmas thinking that would be kind of nice to my family if I just didn't do that right before Christmas. They'd get over it in a year, stupid. And I went down to my garage. I turned on my BMW. I took my Rolex off and put it in the seat. I started the car and I rolled down the windows. I woke up the next morning on the garage floor. I'd have no idea how I got there. And I thought, well, that didn't work. I took a generator I had in my bedroom upstairs in the garage upstairs to my bedroom. I started it. I laid in that bed and I fell asleep. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee. What had happened during that day was no one had responded to texts and phone calls to me, telling me that my little sister, who I love dearly, had been they were thinking they were going to have to put her in the hospital for a problem with her eye. And it would just be not like me at all to not respond to voicemails telling me about something like that. Well, they sent someone to my house, my sister and 2 people from work, and they found me lying in my own urine and feces, unconscious. They had to airlift me to Erlanger. They put me in a hyperbaric chamber that night, and they told my family he will not live tonight. You need to prepare for what you want us to do with him. He's not gonna live. Well, I did, clearly. I made it the next day, and they told him, well, he might live, but he's going to be a vegetable for the rest of his life. You'll have to change his diapers. You'll have to feed him. He's just not going to have a life. The next day, I kept getting better. And they said, well, now at the very least, he's going to have to relearn all of his motor and verbal skills. He's going to basically be a child again. He's going to have to learn everything again. And I walked out of that hospital 5 days later under my own strength. The only permanent damage, I lost a little bit of hearing in this ear. I don't know why. And then I have 2 scars on my forehead. So from now on, when you see me, you'll see these scars and you'll know what it is. From the oxygen sensor they had on my brain, it left dents on me. I got out of that hospital, but still a lot of business to be done with what I had done. It was about a month and a half later. I'd obviously been fired after they found out what I did. The FBI and the U.S. Postal Service knocked on my door, and it wasn't the mailman. It was a man in a business suit who prosecuted crimes. And they asked me if they could take me and talk to me. And they did. I told them everything that I had done. I was honest with them. I went home that day knowing what was likely coming. And about 2 months later, I met with the United States Attorney's Office in Knoxville, Tennessee, where he told me that this time the total was $1.19 million. And that's a financial life sentence. Unless Rick Warren can tell me how to write Purpose-Driven Life 2, I'll pay for that till the day I die. And he said, you're going to do some time. About 2 months later, I was sentenced by a federal judge in Knoxville to the bottom of the guidelines on what I had done to 41 months in a federal prison. And October 14th of 2008, I reported to the federal prison camp at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, of all states, Alabama. And that was rock bottom. And as I laid in that bunk that night in the F wing of Montgomery Unit, all the lights were out after they had counted us at 10 o'clock. God said to me, do I have your attention now? And I said, yeah, you do. I started a stretch there of 2.5 years where you can only talk 30 minutes a day to your family. You can see them on 2 days out of the week. You can only talk to someone for 300 minutes a month on the phone if they're your family or outside of that place. You dress just like this. Green pants, a brown t-shirt, a pair of boots, and a canvas belt. Every day until 4 o'clock when you could put on a pair of sweats if you wanted. Or the weekends. During that time, I told myself, your life is over again. I mean, you're going to walk out of here a convicted felon. When you go fill out a job, now I have to say, yeah, I've been convicted of something more than a traffic violation. I told myself I will never have a life again. No one's going to hire me. No one's going to marry me. And then in 2008, I started that sentence. I walked out of there in 2011 in April to a halfway house. The week before I walked out of there, my wife, Casey, moved here to Nashville from Chicago. I met her that December. And 3 months ago, we married each other. And God says, I will give you back, if you will turn to me, what the locusts ate up. He says in Matthew that he won't break a bruised reed. He won't snuff out that smoldering wick. But you have to turn back to him, and you have to let him have that. And so when Ray said, will you talk about being broken? I said, yeah, I can talk about being broken. I've got a 5-minute, a 10-minute, a 30, and an hour. I can tell you about being broken all day if you want to. But I would just tell you that if you're out there and you think God can't do anything with you, I know exactly what that feels like. I know exactly what that feels like. But if you will look when I walk out of here with this beautiful lady at what God will do for you, if you will let him and give him the control of it. And I'll go back to a job on Monday where I make a decent salary again and full benefits, and a company that said, we're going to give you a chance because we believe in what you can do for us. And a family who said, we love you no matter what you've done. And then this family who you guys say, you can be a part of our church family. Because what God will always say is, there is a place at my table for a felon, for an ex-con, right beside Mother Teresa